Welcome to an invitation to Tony's Universe, our WebinART to accompany Tony King's present exhibition, Patterns of Seeing. It's a treat to share the world according to Tony and to realize how important memory is. Brother Thomas wrote, "Memory is more permanent than matter." In this case, we have many, many memories of Tony. He has provided us with a gentle legacy of favorite images and his ever-changing way of preserving and sharing what he valued. How wonderful it is to have his Judith and his eldest granddaughter, Judith, to provide us with tales of Tony and insights into the many images in our present exhibition, plus some added favorites. On my various travels with the historian of Churchill, Sir Martin Gilbert, Martin would often read and do readings, but before he began each passage, he would credit the author. And then on occasion, he would sometimes say, "As Gilbert has written." Not often do I get to say, "As Pucker has written." But tonight, I will read the brief tribute to Tony that appears in the exhibition catalog. Tony was an eternal seeker and appreciator. Nature was his muse, and his camera was his means of focusing and discovering anew what he and we had never dreamed of. It remains a privilege and a blessing to have known Tony and to have worked with him for 43 years. There was a gentle firmness to his every act. He was blessed with an inner compass that directed the decisions of his rich and meaningful life. Family and nature, friends and art inspired and guided him. His art remains a remarkable invitation to wander with him, to look better and to see better and to better experience and to grow. His generous gifts of openness and quiet joy remain present in a time of happiness as well as in times of distress and unease. During these past months of health issues and social chaos, we are reassured through Tony's pattern of seeing that there are experiences yet to be had, and these experiences will enable us to fashion a more beautiful world for all. That was written 3.5 months ago, June the 15th, which was actually our 61st anniversary as well. And we were then and we are now in the time of COVID and social unrest. For me, the gallery and the artists and their art have become an ever greater resource of generosity and hope, a kind of refuge intended to allow us to breathe the air of inspiration and of dreams. Tony's work, along with the work of Judy and Mark Davis, all provide the good energy that we can and do need. So thank you all who have worked to make this exhibition possible and have worked to make this WebinART a reality. Special thanks to Liz Burgess, who has acted as the gallery curator of photography and its guide. She and Tony had a very special and meaningful friendship that allowed space for trust and growth. Thank you, Liz. And to Rose Montero, who is relatively new at the gallery, but is already making a significant contribution, both of patience and technical abilities. Thank you, Rose. Great thanks to Regina Zanetti, the curator of Tony's art. Many of the tales that will be shared come from Regina's deep knowledge and working relationship with Tony over many, many years. Finally, to Judith and Judith, there's little question that Tony's heart was constantly energized by his family. In fact, all of you were his reason for being. Before we begin, there are a few housekeeping notes. First and foremost, look carefully at your screen. The joy of these WebinARTs has been to have the work of art solely in front of you with no distractions. And it has turned out to be an extraordinary resource and a way of entering the work itself. To Judy and to Judith, who will share a few stories after we have this introduction, along with photos of Tony over many decades. Granddaughter Judith Pickering will read memories and reflections and descriptions that will walk us gently through patterns of seeing in additional works. There'll be a brief opportunity for us to, so to speak, talk Tony at the end. And finally, I've asked Judith to talk about the photographs and the foundation where the proceeds from the sale of photographs do go in order to create a better sense of art as legacy. Just one other note, along the way I may interrupt just simply to respond to both the images and the stories. So we're ready to begin. Judy, would you please share with us memories of Tony? Thank you.
Trying to find words for this happening is very difficult for me. I never thought I would be repeating the story so often told by Tony about our connecting first in the second grade in the 1940s because he was living with his grandparents in Worcester while escaping a polio epidemic in Toronto. So through the years, we knew each other and saw each other at many gatherings. Fast forward to 1957, when we had a long conversation at the airport in June while awaiting different planes. A date, early November, followed, engagement in December, then patiently waiting for our June wedding, as his elder sister was to be married in May. First child in 1960 with 3 to follow. In late 1960, he picked up his camera again after having taken some pictures when younger from his Brownie camera. Selling pipe valves and fittings made a good living, but not fulfilling spiritually. However, it enabled him to take pictures, becoming his lifelong obsession. Many evenings were spent in a helper's darkroom. Trips abroad, his sole purpose was taking pictures. And so many trips, forays, excursions around home, which mostly I enjoyed, combining moments of interest of my own, sketching ideas for collages, needlework, reading, ambling about while his stillness, concentration, and seeking clearings for just the right image were important. But there sometimes were, I must admit, I was not always appreciating his oblivion as time and endless shutter clicks. Why are you always taking the same picture? I'm speaking of the Marsh House. It hasn't changed. Perhaps it's time to go. We can come back. Or in desperation, please, let's go home. This retrospective, hoped for in 2017 after Tony passed, would not have been possible then. One needed to take time to digest and assimilate as best we can the thousands of photographs and hope his appreciation of ordinary things, familiar territories, will ignite sparks and encourage many to stop, look, listen, and truly see the world around us. He strongly believed in the goodness and beauty surrounding us all. I thank Regina, my curator, for her words and ability to focus and combine some of his thoughts with the photographs. And I am proud to introduce my granddaughter, Judith Pickering, who will read and share some of our tour with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Let me just interject briefly that photograph of you and Tony together at the end exudes a sense of affection and love and joy that was always present, it seemed to me, in your relationship. at least what I knew of it. And it infuses, I think, the gallery's ongoing relationship with the two of you, because the intensity of Tony's commitment to you and to your family, literally, as I said before, energized and filled his world in such a meaningful way, and therefore enabled him to help others engage with the world around them, seeking out the same sense of quiet, beauty, and elegance. It's always wonderful to have intergenerational activities. One of the joys of having had the gallery for the 53 years is that not only are we selling to our original clients, but to their children, and now on occasion to their grandchildren. So it's a joy to have Judith the younger with us to both share images that'll be on the screen, and then the texts that were put together primarily by Regina. So Judith, please.
Being a Canadian, Tony never hesitated to go out in the cold. He grew up playing hockey and helping young children in the neighborhood tie their skates. Those were dear memories for him. Hurrying home from school, he couldn't wait to get his skates on and go out and meet up for a quick game. If you look at the image titled Side Hill of the farm truck driving along the edge of the road, it is fascinating how the lighting was caught. I cannot help but think about the bitter cold and the wind cutting through him as he took that image. You can see his dedication and his determination to shoot in any weather. You can see it in the piece titled Waiting for Spring, with the snow-covered red and green lobster traps stacked on the pier, and in the image Departure, the one of the snowy owl who he visited day after day by Goose Rocks Beach. He found peace in the cold, the snow, and the quiet of the winter. He needed to find ways to settle his energy. He needed to get in a mindset that gave him the right presence to envision the best way to work his lens. Oftentimes, he would get up early and sneak away before others arose. He did most of his photographing alone.
At that point, I just wanted to interject, basically, if one wants to feel what New England winters feel like, that photograph certainly captures it, including the windshield wipers just have creating the two eyes on the car moving toward us, and the snow on the extraordinary buildings in the background. Every single element of that photograph, including the wires, the electrical wires above, and then one coming down, creating a composition that is a work of art in and of itself, and then allowing us to take that work of art and feel like we're present in it. On to the next one, please.
Tony saw glory even in the dilapidated piers, cottages, and boats. He had a way of finding their true beauty. Going down to the dock to see what was unfolding as the sun rose was a routine that he valued. It was important to hear the locals' stories of their catches and what they had seen on the open sea. One comment that struck Tony on a busy day, when tourists were flocking to the area, was from a fisherman who said, "I need to go out to sea where it is safe." He related to their longing for the open sea, the rhythm of the waves against their boats. Tony would hire a man to take him out on a boat so that he could photograph the waves, seals, birds, and the glory of the day. He looked forward to those days and was always saddened when it was too rough to go out. As you look at those wave pictures, think of Tony rocking back and forth with his camera, while the captain tried to make sure that Tony wasn't tossed over edge. No matter the surroundings or the potential risks involved, he always tried to lean into his pictures and catch the heart of the image.
If we could go back just to the earlier photograph as well, to give the sensation of physically being in that space. and at the same time being able to experience the color and the form and the beauty of nature as if it is a painting. An extraordinary ability. On the next one, less colorful, but at the same time, it's like fireworks that nature provides us with, but only with the help of Tony reminding us of how important it is to be attentive and to keep looking carefully at places you love. On to the next one.
Tony wrote, "There is a romantic connection between people and boats. Boats offer freedom, identity, and they extend our range. I can remember the first boat I ever had was built by Steve June," he said. "He sold it to me for $7. I called it the Clam. It had a square rigged sail. It was 5 feet long, square on both ends, and I probably bought $20 worth of caulking, which it required to keep afloat. I remember I got my mother to help me caulk it, which she didn't enjoy much, but I loved it anyway, and it took me places I couldn't go on my own. Islands, reefs, and places beyond, to fish where I had never fished before."
If you have the ability, Rose, to go back to the village dories just for one moment. As I'm looking at this evening on my screen, there is a kind of arrangement and elegance to the positioning of the three boats and the reflections that brings to mind, strangely enough, the still life paintings of Morandi, where every single object, very humble objects, had their own place. But here, to engage with that sense of beautiful sunlight captured in each one of the three boats differently, makes it into an extraordinary composition that you can come back to over and over and over again. So let's go on. I'm sorry, but that piece and the opportunity to see it isolated in a way, as I said before, on your screen or on my screen, stunned me in a way that I've never seen it before. Thank you, Rose.
A carpenter working in Tony's studio commented about a framed image of Dandelion Wreck. This wooden sailboat had gotten tangled in lobster trap ropes and lost its steering abilities, which caused it to smash on the rocks in front of a lighthouse. Years later, pieces of the boat eventually landed in a nearby salt marsh, and these aged and weathered pieces were dragged out, dried, and worked into the kitchen decor of a home overlooking the sea. This story touched Tony, and he immediately requested that a print of the wreck be given to the homeowner, hoping that they would consider putting it in their kitchen so that they'd have a reminder of where it had come from. When speaking about boats, Tony once said, they could be very loud, but they had a rhythmic beat, very much like a heartbeat. Those boats seem more animal than separate from humanity or mechanical." Tony always had a camera with him. Most people didn't know when he was taking a picture. They might be photographed from the back, or it might be of their hands or the side view of their shoulders as they leaned over. Quote, "My offering is the reflection in the words and photos of a natural lifelong interest in the ordinary and otherwise, life around me, wherever I am, whatever I'm doing." Tony was known by sight. People recognized his form, a tall man with a hat and a camera around his neck. He would be spotted all over the community, and people would often stop and ask him what he was photographing. Once, a man asked him what he was taking a picture of. Tony responded something like, "Oh, that shed over there," to which the man replied, as he rolled down the window, "Why would you photograph that?" shaking his head as he drove off. From the outside, people didn't understand how he could, with the right lighting, with the right presence, caused that little shed to show what ordinary, everyday things had to offer.
If we go back, I just wanted to mention and to highlight one of the nicest aspects of being able to show both Judy's collages alongside Tony's photographs and Tony's photographs along Judy's collages is the way that they both were and are attentive to the world around them and appreciate exactly what they are seeing, and then creating through their own medium an access for us. So the lovely juxtaposition of these two doorways, windows. One is, I've always thought about windows as the eyes to the soul of the people who live in those spaces. And to have then Judy's illuminated with the light and the flower adds a wonderful energy to the scene in a beautiful way. So thank you, and there will be another couple of options as we go through opportunities to watch the juxtaposition of the works. Next one, please.
Quote, "My work is about exceptions, what's different. In a hurried world, I am drawn to what takes time, what takes pain. In a world of automatic, I am interested in the manual, what involves the hands, and in a homogenized world, I worship the authentic."
If anything and anyone were to use a descriptive word about Tony, then that last word certainly would be it, authentic. In addition, this photograph brings to mind a photograph of, I think, called Three Sisters, which are three heads of horses somehow brought together in a very intimate way, in the way that these boats are brought together and some held together. But again, the lines that are holding them together also hold a tension in them that maintain our attention. Next image, please. Wow.
Tony loved anything that was handmade. When he received a handmade drawing from a grandchild, an artistically presented meal from his wife Judy, or a needlepoint pillow from a daughter, it meant the world to him. He would search for things that had that feel. He thought when you worked on something, part of your essence or spirit went into that piece. He had beloved pens and lucky coins that he would keep in his pocket, and these items offered him comfort. They stirred his memories and filled his heart.
Again, this is a wonderful example of the juxtaposition of the two images, that the shapes of the sail inspired both artists to record it, but record it with their own vocabulary. Tony with the sailboat, what looks like through a window, and Judy's with the sense of openness in the sky. And what I love, and it's very nice to be able to see the scale of Judy's things, the 4.5 inches by 3 inches. So you're literally looking into a very small aperture of reality. And at the same time, you have an enormous sense of space, whereas Tony's is framed. And so you have the contrast of the two in such a beautiful way. Next image, please.
Tony was not a handyman in terms of fixing things, as Judy can attest. He would often say that he was lucky to have a wife like Judy. When they had furnace problems, she was the one on site that figured things out. He was always in such awe of anyone who could create using their hands. He felt very lucky to be born in a time where there were cameras which allowed him to capture pictures, to make in a different way, in a way that did not require him to use a piece of wood or a box of paints. Tony went from using a little brownie camera that his mother handed him as he was leaving for camp to complex, technical digital cameras that allowed him to instantly check images, edit them, and send them across the country within minutes. Although he was intrigued by the ever-changing world of digital cameras, he always came back to his Leica cameras, his film cameras. On several occasions, he sold his analog cameras, but then he'd miss them, go online, and find and buy the same model back. He missed the feel, the natural ease of operating them. Using them was a second nature to him. Tony also loved working with his processors, but being dyslexic was problematic in the darkroom, and the reversing of images wasn't a strength for him. Early on, he did it all himself, but eventually he went searching for the best person he could find who had the right enthusiasm for what could happen in the darkroom. That was key. Tony was, of course, right there at every step of the way. He wasn't going to miss the wizardly magic that could occur there. After Tony passed, we were in need of a framer, and someone recommended a local woman who I contacted about the job. She said that she would be thrilled to work with some of Tony King's images. I said, "Oh, you knew him?" And she said, "Well, not really, but he was very good to me." I questioned her on that point, and she said, "Years ago, when I graduated with a degree in photography, he had been asking around town for a young photographer who might be starting out in the field. He tracked me down and gave me all of his developing equipment, to a complete stranger. I am grateful he offered a helping hand to me, and we never really saw each other again." She found it fascinating that 40 years later, she had the opportunity to give back and work with his images. He called these stories circle stories. Tony felt that the images he put out into the world would oftentimes come back in some way.
And I would add that it is very much like Tony to be planting seeds. And similarly, in the process of planting seeds, they do eventually sprout and sometimes even provide you with nourishment. And in this case, the combination of him having sought her out and now her being again nourished by the opportunity to be involved with his work and his legacy is really splendid.
Quote, "My strength is my taste for small places and deep familiarity." A common place to find Tony was around the edges of things. He believed that's where life happened. That's where change was occurring. So he would walk along the edges of the ocean, fields, and roadways. For example, I think of Sand Dollar 1. The sand dollar is so perfectly positioned in the moving sand of the beach for a matter of just minutes before being drawn back into the sea. Fleeting. Tony delighted in finding treasures such as shells, traps, and debris. He viewed each as things that were pieces of time that told a story left behind. The stone walls that he would revisit again and again held stories. Think of the hands that placed the rocks in such a way years ago to protect the cottages and roads against the forces of the ocean. Although Tony had many strengths, driving undistracted was simply not one of them. There were times he may have driven too close to the edge of the road because he was looking for something that deserved to be noticed along the edge. We all appreciated his determination to capture it all, the extraordinary that was camouflaged within the ordinary.
Let me just suggest that those of you who have access to the catalog, it's also available as an e-catalog, need to turn to page 12, where you will find the heavy wall, which we forgot to include. But I do urge you to look at it because it is one of these wonderful moments of capturing the shapes and the relationships in an abstract way. And for the most part, when looking at Tony's works, because we're urged to look at the details of what we're seeing, we don't also take into consideration that the abstract composition of many of the works is enormously effective. And as we'll just see in the next images, there are wonderful squares and rectangles, textures and shapes, all of which, if you do away with the flag and the Coca-Cola sign and so forth, are really abstract forms playing off of one another in a beautiful way. So on with the text.
Wandering along the edge of the sea, Tony found this cement building by a beach. At some point, it was a beloved building where they probably had hamburgers, hot dogs, and ice cream with kids waiting to get in line for something, sorry. Tony loved the chance to scratch someone's imagination with an image, causing them to drift back in time to a place's heyday. He went back and photographed the building in color, in black and white, and over the years. One of the last pictures he took was weathered stars and stripes. Here, one of the boards actually slipped down, and you could see right through to the other side. This was Tony, trying to draw people in, to make them curious about that opening in the building, to bring the viewer into the environment.
It's a wonderful triptych, actually. If you think about the three of them, it's a triptych not only visually, but it's a triptych as a journey into and living with time. And so those three pieces, one after the other, have this sense of being a trio in a way that reminds us that all of life is relatively impermanent, but that art serves to preserve it as a permanence. Next image, sorry.
He would oftentimes include a little strip of the town or a road sign in the photograph, giving people an idea or hint of where it was taking place. He really tried to leave things in his images to encourage viewers to engage longer and to hold their attention.
There's little or no question that you feel like you're in so many different places within this single photograph, whether it's the sky reflected, whether it's the missing panes, whether it's the texture and the worn aspects of the wood itself, and then the square frame of the window with all of its marks where the nails have rusted and the color of the rust has created patterns on the ancient wood. What a wonderful way to remember and to see. On to the next one, please.
Quote, "I am interested in how children become. I bring everything to the test of children, even if it's for the most sophisticated audience. If it's going to work well, it's got to be child clear, child simple, child curious." Once, Tony was hired to do a contract project at a school. When he arrived at the school, the kids were fascinated by him and his camera. In talking with them, he soon realized that some of them were not only curious, but also shy about being around the camera. He told the children, "Oh, there's no film in this camera. This was just a practice run." It put them at ease, and he took some amazing images of those children. Tony always tried to be unobtrusive with his photographs and never wanted anyone to be bothered by his presence. As time went by, he started doing more partial images. He didn't want to show individuals' faces because he understood their discomfort with being photographed. So he tended to photograph in a way that suggested the viewer focused not only on the person, but rather what they were doing with their hands, their shadows, their actions.
And that aspect of doing photography or painting enables the viewer to then fill in the rest of the information. It reminds me years ago of a news broadcaster, I think out of Chicago, named Paul Harvey. And now you know the rest of the story, but the rest of the story is what we as viewers are able to infuse into each and every one of these photographs, especially the next one, please.
Tony himself was uncomfortable with attention. Although he was a public speaker who for years traveled around speaking to different groups and organizations about nature, wildlife, and conservation, He was shy in front of the camera. He would photograph his shadow or reflection on the water or in a window. In this image, notice the tips of a tree that come right over the edge of the wall from behind. See how those branches look like the continuation of the shadow of a tree? It's all a trick, a specific important moment captured. It makes us scratch our heads and want to understand the many layers, to look longer, to think harder, and to linger.
And I think it's a nice opportunity to linger on the image itself, as each one of us could find ourselves in a situation similar to that. And at the same time, notice the richness of the blacks in the tree on the right-hand side of the image and the splendor of the wall itself. And again, the intricacy with which the stones themselves are in place. And then the very silent shadow of the artist being somehow present, but at the same time wanting to absent himself from intruding on our ability to experience the moment and the beauty of that moment. Next images, please.
Quote, "What interests me is intimacy, knowing a place really well. I have not been to many places, but I have been to a few places many times. To honor something, it helps to develop understanding along with affection and admiration. I return to the same places again and again, trying to get to know them better. If you hang around any place long enough, it all starts to give you things, but you have to pay attention."
So another juxtaposition of Judy's collage and Tony's photograph, and how they, in a sense, enhance one another in such a beautiful way. The simplicity of the sky in both of them serves to highlight the structures in both. I always marveled when we visited in Maine in Judy's rather small space, because all she did was need a small space in order to create these very rich, small images. Every detail in Tony's photograph is, in a sense, simplified in Judy's collage, particularly in the juxtaposition of these two pieces. Next one, please.
Heart Rock was an image that meant a lot to Tony's family and friends. In fact, there's a friend that has purchased over 20 images of the Heart Rock to give to engaged nieces, nephews, and grandchildren, anyone that had made a commitment. When questioned about the rock and where he photographed it, he said it was a rock that he would visit every season. He knew right where it was, on the edge of the road, at the edge of the sea, and he would go out to the rock and photograph it frequently. Tony felt a commitment to places. He felt it was his responsibility to check back, and that if you truly love a place, that you care about it, visit it, and pay attention to what's happening to it. He was a lover of nature and a protector, so visiting places, visiting those places, was important to him. One season, he came up to Maine and he couldn't find the Heart Rock and became distressed. He came back a few more times searching for it, and he eventually found it, but it had been shifted by a large winter storm. The thought of losing the rock worried him, so he mentioned to some fishermen that were on the nearby docks that if they ever had time and could figure out a way to help him get this rock, he would love to have it moved to his yard. That's how much it meant to him. He had made the same request to others over the years, but this particular group of men surprised him and came to his door within a week and said, "We've got this rock loaded. It's on a flatbed. Where do you want it?" Tony was stunned. As it turned out, this rock was shaped more like a tooth, and the top of it, that Tony knew so well, was just the tip. It was much larger than anyone had expected, but they did place it in Tony's yard, and it is still there now. Enveloped by flowers, many people have come to visit and see the Heart Rock, which is still visited often and surrounded by love.
Thank you, Judith, so much, because it provided us, I think, with a wonderful, both verbal journey and visual journey through a collection both of stories and of images that hopefully provided everyone who was watching and listening with an adequate, if not perfect, portrait of Tony. So thank you very much. Next, what I'd like to simply do, and we can leave this image on the screen if you want, or if you want to show the people as fellow Edward Rose, is to invite Judy to at least respond to this opportunity to journey through Tony's work and to share any of your own experiences, responses over the many, many, many years from whatever you said, 1957 to this moment.
Are you talking to Judith or me? No.
To Judith the Elder, I think. We'll go with that.
I'm not prepared for this. There were so many. I just want to say that we believe our natural world is so precious, and the proceeds from the sales of our works go to the Tony and Judy King Foundation, which continues to support our interest and concern in the natural world surrounding us.
That's an extraordinary opportunity to extend what you both have believed in for so many years, namely the art itself will now generate means to continue to preserve those things which both of your art have managed to record for all of us. It's an interesting model. As many of you may know, over the years, when Brother Thomas was taken ill in 2007 or 2006, actually, at the very end of the year, and given 2 weeks to live. Fortunately, he lived for 8 months. And he wanted to create a foundation that helps struggling artists. And the notion that art itself enriches our lives in very important ways when it is being made, when it remains in the world for us to access. And then to add on top of that, that the art can generate means that create a legacy that perpetuate in a meaningful way what the art and the artists cared about. So in the case of Tony and Judy's work, the legacy, in addition to the work itself, will be the perpetuation through the foundation of supporting those things that the art speaks of, which is it speaks very clearly and very beautifully about the nature that is around us and the nature that we need to both be attentive to and preserve. So it's a very beautiful legacy, and one that I think all of us should be grateful for. Any other comments, Judy, that you would like to make? You're more than welcome to, or we're also in a situation which I love with Zoom opportunities to say, you know, this is what we would like to have shared. We've shared it, and we want to thank everyone for being part of it. These are extraordinary moments, and I think to have created this tribute to Tony, especially with the extraordinary work of Regina and the preservation of these stories. Interestingly enough, as you were reading some of Tony's quotes, many of them seem quite familiar because they appeared in printed notes from Tony to me at the gallery over the years. And they were really an affirmation on an ongoing basis of a dearly held, sincerely held world vision that was his. And he, and I think all of us were fortunate that he was able to live out that mission, out that vision. I mentioned a couple of days ago that we took a number of trips through the gallery to Japan, and I so wanted Tony to come with us to really photograph and help me see Japan in a way that I probably would never have been able to. His answer was pretty much the same. I need to go back to those places which are my places. And certainly, if nothing else, I hope this evening has indicated that those places were truly his. And by investing in those places in such a genuine and persistent manner, he's left us with an extraordinary legacy of detailed beauty that is available to all of us. So I encourage you to have an opportunity to visit the gallery. The show is up for a while longer. There's also a virtual tour of the exhibition for those who are still not comfortable traveling during the time of COVID, which literally allows you to walk through the exhibition and to enjoy and experience it in a way that, as someone said the other day when they got the invitation for a virtual tour, fantastic. You saved me a 45-minute drive, you saved me a $40 parking fee, and I got to see the exhibit. So I certainly would advocate for all of you who have an interest to please take an opportunity to visit. In addition, if you get in touch with the gallery, there is an entire PDF, essentially, of the collages of Judy that are available. So altogether, let me just say thank you for joining us and have a lovely evening. The evening will be one fraught with a lot of other activities, including a debate. So happily, this was not a debate, but a celebration, and we're delighted to have shared it with you. Good night, and thank you for being with us.